Patrick's here to discuss how to generate breakthrough opportunities from your network. And the reason we decided to team up and do this webinar is because, as many of you know, it's our mission at FollowUp to help you better manage professional relationships. And that doesn't just mean building a tool for you to use. A big part of that's actually providing the knowledge and best practices on how you can succeed with it. And I think Patrick's a great person to help out in that area. His company, Maven, is Silicon Valley's #1 relationship management coaching resource. And he's even been called the executive coach for VCs, CEOs, and some of the brightest minds in the Valley by Forbes. He's an absolute pro at understanding how to get the most out of your relationships. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say and share with us today.
Okay. Wow. What a very powerful introduction, Cody. Thank you so much. And I got to tell you, Cody, when we came up with this idea of hosting this webinar together, I really liked it. And the reason I loved it personally is that you were so motivated by saying, look, we're building tools for people to, be more efficient and have better relationships with people. But ultimately, when it comes to relationships, you also need to have a lot of knowledge, a lot of best practices, and that's something we're not supplying. And so you basically saying, hey, we should do something together, I thought was just very inspirational. And so I'm very excited to, talk to you guys today and share a few of my experiences and best practices around how you can get the most out of your network. And so before I get started, Cody, I think what I should do is we should switch off the video so that the audience can focus on, on the content. And then what we'll do is at the end of it, we'll turn it on again. So very good. Cody, if you could just double check, I am now moving forward in the slides. Do we have the speaker slides up and running? Do you see that?
Yep, all good.
Yeah. Okay, so there you guys get at least the beautiful pictures of the two of us. But at the end of the day, I'm really excited to be here, right? And the reason I'm excited is because I want to make sure you guys walk away from this session with a lot of value. The idea that I brought today is that I want you guys to discover 3 things. And the 3 things that I want to cover today is basically how you can leverage your network to achieve the success that you're seeking, how to get breakthrough opportunities from your network. Number 2 is that I want to talk to you about how you can overcome the urgent and focus more on doing the important, because one thing that is true when it comes to relationship marketing is that it's always important, but almost never urgent, right? And the third thing that I want to do is I want to convince you, I want to talk to you guys about what I call the operator, or what is known in the Silicon Valley as the operator. And I kind of want to convince you why you guys want to basically should try to become one in that way. And so when I do these webinars, one thing that is always important to me is that I understand the audience, and that what I'm talking about is actually relevant to you guys here today. And that's why we sent the survey out to you guys right before, at least those that signed up. And I got to say, I'm very impressed by the response. And the most important question I thought we asked was like, hey, are relationships critical, right? Are relationships a necessary element for you guys to reach your fullest potential, right? And the answers were overwhelmingly yes. So everybody here today seems to feel that this is, or most people here seems to feel that that's really important. And that's of course important to me, because that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about. And so let me kick off with a very simple but powerful statement. And I want to see how you guys resonate with this, right? And the statement says, good things come to those who work their asses off and never give up. Right? It's a strong statement. I get it. But most people, and I am one of them, would agree with that. Like, if you work hard, good things will come to you, right? The only issue I take with this particular statement is that it is it's hard, it's brutal, right? And people that that live by that statement have to work very hard, and so we ended up calling them the grinders, right? The people that work very hard, and because they work so hard, they achieve their success. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think it's somewhat table stakes. You have to work hard to be successful. But most people that work that way often forget another component, and that other component would resonate a lot more with this statement. So let me read it and see if you guys agree with that as well, right? It says, good things come to those who also take care of people and make it personal. You guys can already see that I'm thinking about this in a very different way. You see a child putting water on plants, right? And so the reason I find this so powerful, this statement, is because this can be as easy as child's play or as easy as just adding water to a plant. You know, the grinder is the person who puts the plants into the ground, and that's hard work, no doubt. But basically, you can achieve so much more results if you just add water, if you make sure irrigation works, right? And that's an elegant way of managing your career, especially if your career is based on relationships in one way or the other, like 90% of the people here seem to believe so, right? And so the people that are really good at that, I call the operators, right? And so what the operator is, I will talk about in a little while. And also, I want to make sure you guys stay out to the end, because at the end, I do want to do a bit of an announcement of something very, very special, at least special to me. I hope you guys think it's special as well. And I don't want you to miss it. Okay, so definitely stick around to the end, and I hope that my content will keep you glued to the chair anyway. But hey, we're here to talk about opportunities, and so getting more opportunities, and if we want to do that, we have to first and foremost ask ourselves, where do the opportunities come from, right? And the answer in almost all of the cases, if not 80% of the cases, is basically through referrals, right? The best things we ever see, we get from people we know and trust, and when we get them from these people, they come to us in form of referrals. And so what we have to ask ourselves is, what drives referrals? If that is what's going to make us most successful, what drives them? And most people basically just think, hey, if I work very hard, referrals will happen. And while that's true to a certain extent, it's also a very myopic view of how referrals work, right? And the answer that I think is true is that referrals is nothing else but a process that takes place. And the better we understand that process, the more we can basically leverage the process for our own success and help it on the path of reaching our fullest potential. And in my world, there are only two factors that describe that referral process. And I want to just quickly jump into it and share what I think is true, right? There are two factors that drive a referral to your doorstep. Factor number one is timing, right? What I mean with that is when somebody that you know come across somebody else who is interested in, who has a need that you would be willing to fulfill, or carries an opportunity that you'd like to hear about. The problem with timing is that we have absolutely no control over that, right? That need arises when the need arises, right? And they connect with somebody we know when they connect with somebody we know. There's absolutely nothing we can do about that. The only thing that we can know about that or learn about that is if we were to look at you guys' network right now and get full transparency into it and see all of the opportunities, we would probably learn that there are way more opportunities in your network right now than you hear about. In fact, it's a dramatic ratio of only like 5% of what you currently hear about. So the good news about this notion of timing is that the first few things we do towards getting better will yield dramatic results, right? But the bad news is timing is something we have absolutely no control over. And that's why it's important to talk about the second factor. And the second factor is the ability of somebody to think of you at the time he or she comes across that need that you want to hear about, that you want to, fulfill. And that ability is driven by one thing and one thing only. And that is how much mindshare you enjoy in those people's heads. How, another way to put it, how top of mind you are, right? And so the neat thing is the more you're top of mind, the more likely it is that this person will think of you at the time he or she comes across that need. And if they do think of you, it is very likely that you actually hear about that opportunity, right? And the powerful realization about this notion of mindshare is that we have almost 100% control over staying top of mind with the right set of people in a network. It's basically a choice, right? And that's basically where all of a sudden this concept can become very powerful, because whenever we have a choice, we can come up with the right set of tactics and strategies to execute against that. And that's basically what I want to talk to you guys about today, how to do it. But before we do that, let's get a little bit deeper into this mechanic and understand truly how this notion of mindshare works, right? And so you see this beautiful graph here. On the left-hand side, you see mindshare from 0 to 100%, right? 100% is what I have right now with you guys because I'm talking to you guys. I have 100% mindshare. And then we have on the other axis, the time going by in weeks and months. All right. And so what happens is, let's say you meet with somebody, right? You have a lunch meeting, fair enough. Your mind share goes up to 100%. You had a great time, and then you say goodbye and you let the days, weeks, and months go by. And what happens in that person's brain is that your mind share decays, right? It gets less and less and less and less, right? It's called neuroplasticity. I'm sure you guys have heard about this. It's a real thing. It's science. It's in layman terms, use it or lose it. And while it's typically applied to knowledge, it just applies to relationships just as much. And so your mind share decays, and eventually it decays below that certain threshold, wherever it is, where people are physically not capable of thinking of you anymore, right? They just can't think of you, because in their brains, the neural pathways will decay. They will be used or rewired for other things they need to be using, because you are not around, right? And what then typically happens, and I'm sure most of you guys, if you've been for 10 years or more in business, you've had this situation where you think, oh my God, it's been over 6 months since I reached out to Peter, right? And you're like, oh my God, I have to reach out to him. So you reach out to them, you request the meeting, you get back to 100%. A week or two later, you have your lunch meeting again, because it's been 6-8 months. And you sit down with Peter, and the first thing he says to you is like, hey, Patrick, I wish you would have reached out 2-3 weeks earlier. I had the perfect opportunity for you, right? And the first reaction that you probably have at that point in time is like, what a jerk, what an asshole. Why would you not let me know, right? But Cody, I got to ask you, I mean, who do you think is truly here to blame?
I mean, I don't think you can blame anyone but yourself there.
Right, exactly. Why? Because you let the mind share, decay below that certain threshold. And Peter wasn't capable of thinking of us at that point in time anymore, right? So you just got to blame yourself first and foremost before you call, bad words on other people, even though it's emotionally completely understandable. And trust me, Cody, I've been there, right? And so the question we have to ask ourselves, how do we fix it, right? How do we get out of this situation? How do we make sure that happens a lot less? And the answer is absolutely common sense based, right? All you have to do is make sure that your mind share never decays below that certain threshold, right? And you do that by touching these people more often, but you got to touch them in the right way. So for example, after the lunch meeting, send a follow-up email. Then, you've heard about what his needs are. Maybe you can make an introduction. Maybe you can help him with a professional challenge that he has. If you are active on places like Twitter and LinkedIn, they might actually read your name. That's all it takes to get back to 100%. That's the beauty of this. It's super simple. They see your name, they see Patrick, boom, back to 100%. If they met an opportunity for you a day or two before, they will think of you at that point in time, and so on and so forth until you have that lunch meeting again. But in this case, as you see in this graph, that mind share never decays below that certain threshold. And that's all we have to do. So, I try to, at Maven, we pride ourselves on being exceptionally pragmatic, right? And so I want to give something very pragmatic to you, and that is a habit that I would recommend all of you guys to adapt. And the habit is send one email a day to somebody who otherwise would have not gotten an email from you, right? What I mean with that is send an email to people that you don't send an email because of course of business, right? It's people that basically, that wouldn't hurt from you. And if you do that, Cody, how many, you seem to be a smart person. How many more emails would I send in a year?
So that'd be what, 365?
Well, yeah, that's because you're an entrepreneur and you work 7 days a week. But, the mere mortals of us probably work 5 days a week. So let's go for that. And that's 260, right? 260 days. You would send that one email. That means you're sending 260 more emails in a year. You got to ask yourself, if I do that, and it's a 5-minute effort a day, like it's not a lot I'm asking for, won't something good happen to me if I do this 260 times a day, right? So that's basically what I want you guys to do. And one of the awesome features that we have in FollowUp is that, it can help you with that. It can help you by setting reminders, and it can remind you of reaching out to people that you think you should stay more top of mind with. But let's jump on and basically agree with this, right? I hope you guys most agree with it, and you probably all think, wow, this is so simple. because everything that I've so far talked is really not rocket science, right? So it sounds simple, but why is it so hard then? Why do we not do this? So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what gets in the way? And what gets in the way are three barriers. These are barriers that I think are based on very fundamental aspects of the human condition, and that makes it so hard. So what we have to do is learn how to overcome these barriers, right? And what I want to use the rest of the time today is talk about those, right? The barrier number one is we don't know who to reach out to, so we're struggling. Reaching out to people is important for your success. There's no doubt about it, given what we've learned, but it's almost never urgent. So how do we overcome urgency versus importance? And the third thing is, hey, it's time to reach out to Cody. What the hell am I going to tell him? What am I going to write? I don't want to come across as spammy, right? So let's walk through those things as best as we can in the time we have, and we start by identifying the right people. Who do you reach out to? And the answer is absolutely simple in my view, right? Again, completely common sense based. You got to ask yourself, who do you need to stay top of mind with most? And the people that you need to stay top of mind with is those people that come across the opportunities you seek more often than others, right? Who sees regularly the type of opportunities that you currently have in your network? And then, of course, who of those people are willing to refer them to you because you have a working relationship with them that is based on trust and mutual likability to a certain extent, right? Those are the right people. So we have to basically get you to think of these people. And I want you to do that right now if you can. Take 30 seconds and ask yourself who comes to mind. And when I say that, I don't mean people, I mean groups of people, right? So the reason why that's so important is because it creates a frame of mind that helps you not only find the people that are currently top of mind in your head, which are probably the people you have the least problem with staying top of mind with, but those people that are a little further away, a little bit more out on the edges, that actually come across the opportunities you want, but you don't touch them regularly enough. So think about groups, because once you think of groups of people, let's say it's former clients, right? It's very easy to create a list around those people. And former clients might be the kind of people you need to stay top of mind with, because at least they can send referrals with a very strong endorsement, which makes them some of the most powerful referrals we get. So Cody, why don't I ask you, while I have everybody else writing down at least 3 groups, into 3 groups onto a piece of paper or something of who there is. I'm curious, Cody, what is it, when you and I talked, you said, the opportunities you're interested in getting are, for example, getting the word out more about what you guys are doing, more publicity and PR, and so on and so forth. So if we take that as the opportunity you are seeking out of your network, who are the groups of people that come to mind for you in terms of people that could introduce you to journalists and other, prominent bloggers and stuff?
Yeah, so for us, I think it would really be like-minded entrepreneurs and leaders who are kind of in the relationship management space. I think that those are the people that have a voice that's being listened to as well as ours, and can kind of help us get some of that feature that you're talking about.
Yes, awesome. Who else?
I'd even say small business owners, because our audience are really the people who understand most of what we're trying to do. And for us to be able to learn from them, I think we need to be able to speak to them as well.
Right. And so those would be 2 groups out of which you can start focusing your mindshare management efforts towards, to be able to get more opportunities, have people write stories about what you guys are up to, what you guys are doing. And that's exactly the kind of exercise I want everybody today on this webinar to try to do, right? It's straightforward in my view. So let's assume you guys all did that. The next question that we then have to do is basically the next thing that I would recommend you guys use your FollowUp tool to create tags. There's a tagging functionality, and you can create tags that basically, in Cody's case, it would be tags for fellow leaders in the relationship marketing space, as well as prominent small business leaders, or as a tag. and then basically start adding the people that comes to mind to those tags. And then, Cody, if I'm correctly informed, you guys are working on a really exciting feature that will actually help that even better.
Yeah, absolutely. So the feature that we're working on is what we're calling contact follow-ups. And what those do is they basically enable you to set how often you want to stay in touch with someone. So the way it works is you would go to a contact's profile and select the amount of time that you'd want to go without speaking with them. And then we'd shoot you a reminder email if that time passes. So for example, I'd probably want to set a 1-month contact follow-up for Patrick because he's someone I think is fairly important to my network. And then if he and I don't email for a month, follow-up's going to notify me that it's time to reach out. The other thing is that every single time we do communicate, that follow-up period is going to reset. So I can just set it that initial time and forget about it.
Yes, that's awesome. Right. So that's very powerful. And when do you think is that do you already have a time frame of when we can expect seeing that?
I can't give you an exact date, but I can tell you we're a couple months out. And we're actually be sending you a follow-up email on that, giving you some more details about how to use the feature. I'm sure there's a lot of questions there. But yeah, within the next couple of months, everyone will be able to use that feature.
Okay, and so as soon as you get a hold on it, one advice that I have for you is be conservative with the amount, with the frequencies that you pick. Meaning, don't go too rapid. You know, don't do. For example, I would say every month, only pick very few people with whom you were to do that, because what typically happens when you do that is that you get excited about this feature and you start adding too many people to too high of a frequency. And then you feel like you're running, up a hill that you can't beat. So be very specific. Focus on just 30 to 40 people that you would call, let's call them your legends, people that have a high ability and willingness to support you. And then find a frequency that you think, given what is going on in your life, you can actually truly live up to. All right. But so besides that feature, one of the problems we will run into is making this type of work a priority. And the reason why is because doing this work is absolutely important, right? But often, unfortunately, not urgent. And I think most of you guys have seen this graph one point in their life, if you've received training before, right? It's very simple. Most people make the mistake that they, like everybody, first focus on urgent and important, but then they do urgent but not important before they do important but not urgent, right? And what we need to learn is to basically work on urgent and important, no doubt, but then work first on important but not urgent and leave for last the urgent but not important, right? And so here again, we asked the audience the question in the survey, hey, how do you feel about being more proactive? Do you think you are way too reactive in your life and you need to get a little bit more proactive? And again, we had a very, very resounding yes coming from everybody here. 90% of people saying, yes, this is a challenge I have. And so I feel good about that because I have a lot of good advice. And the advice I want to share with you right now is just like showing you 3 tips, if you will, on how to overcome the urgent versus important dilemma, right? And I'm going to talk about the first 2 ones here right now, and then I'll go into detail around the third one. But the first one says you got to make it more important, more heavy. You have to give it more gravity, right? And the tip is very simple. If you are somebody who's serving clients in your profession, you probably have this attitude that the clients come first. The clients, I do whatever I have to do, for my clients. I sacrifice a lot for my clients. It's sort of this grinder mentality that most of us at least bring to the table. And and the interesting thing is that we do that so much so that we actually are willing to sacrifice other parts of our business. That's not as important as clients, right? So the tip that I have with you when it comes to your relationship marketing efforts, the stuff that we're talking about today, basically make your mind believe that that's a client of yours. Literally try that out, create a mindset that says that work is as important as working for my clients. And then treat that type of work as if it's one of your clients. Because if you do that, you will actually shift your attitude towards it. And you will not say things like, hey, I can do that tomorrow. And then the next day you say, oh, I can do that tomorrow. And all of a sudden you realize that 3 weeks go by without you not doing what is important, but just reacting to the urgent. Okay, that's a very simple mindset shifting tactic that is exceptionally powerful, even though it's so simple. The second one is finding the right time. People struggle finding the time, and this in the beginning, while it is not habitualized, needs to be managed, right? And so I have two big pieces of advice. Number one is start practicing what I call white space time. White space time is carving out time on your calendar that is there for proactive work, whatever you think you need to work on proactively. But one component of that is staying in touch with people that you otherwise wouldn't stay in touch with. I've written a whole book on how to do white space time well, and in the email that we're going to send as a follow-up, we'll certainly include a link of where you can find it, or you can go to our website and find it there too. The third piece, and the second piece that I have on finding the right time is something called action triggers. Action triggers are basically is the technique of piggybacking off of an existing habit. So I wouldn't be surprised if most of you guys like drinking coffee. And you drink the coffee in the morning, probably at one point after you arrive in the office, you get yourself the coffee. Well, that's a habit. You don't put that into the calendar and say, oh, it's now time to get coffee. You don't need a reminder. You just do it, right? And so that's an existing habit that we can leverage to establish, for example, that new habit I gave you earlier, the 1 email a day. So before you allow yourself to get the coffee, simply write that 1 email. Right? What then happens is that you will always send the email because you use the coffee almost as a reward mechanism for having done the other habit. And eventually, if you do this for about 60 days, that habit will probably live on its own, and you don't need the action trigger per se. Very, very powerful concept. Hope you liked it. The third thing is basically you got to make it easy, right? And what I mean with making it easy is the things you need to be doing to manage relationships, to deliver better experiences. You have to get to a point where it's basically more or less effortless. And there's only one way to do that. And that is by getting leverage. You can only do that by getting leverage. And it's really interesting. If you are a lawyer, or if you're a recruiter, or if you are a consultant, in the delivery of your product, you probably are already heavily leveraged, meaning you have people working for you that help you deliver the product. It's really interesting. People don't try to get leverage in the relationship management space. And most people think of that as not possible because you don't want to become disingenuous in some way or other. But there are ways in which you can do it. And the way you do it is just simply hire an EA if you don't already have one, or a virtual assistant, because they come a little bit more cost effective. And then you turn them into what we call an engagement manager, or what we call an EM. And so what is an EM? An EM is basically nothing else but a hybrid between a EA and a chief of staff, if you will. And he or she has 2 jobs, or 2 primary responsibilities. Number one, find all sorts of ways to save you time by taking over things that you're currently doing that aren't really adding value to your objectives in some way or other. And it's amazing how few people have pushed the envelope there. The second thing is that you want this person to help you deliver great experiences to your network as aggressively as possible. And both of those basically can be very powerful. So Cody, let me ask you one question. Would you think it's a good idea to send a follow-up email to anybody that you felt you should spend at least 60 minutes with?
Oh, absolutely. I think
right. Exactly. Thank you. Not everybody says absolutely. I have some very high-powered, very busy CEOs who basically say, "Well, it depends." But I think the answer is absolutely, right. If you spend 60 minutes of your time, you should spend the extra time to also finish off that experience with a really decent follow-up email. It's the right thing to do, but the reality is we don't always do it. In fact, the best of us maybe get it done 50% of the time. So how can you solve that? Well, you leverage 3 factors. Number one, nobody has valued you forever. Nobody has ever valued you for writing an email, right? They only value you for sending it. That's number one. Number two, you can talk about 4 to 5 times faster than you can type. And you can talk wherever you are, while you can only type when you're in front of the computer. So for example, use your EM to dictate into your phone using a dictation app that can ship an email into a task management solution for your EM, or ship the recording into it. And you dictate the follow-up email right after a meeting. She listens to that, turns that into something that reads well, and puts that into your draft folder. Now it's sitting in your draft folder. And And all you have to do is read it, and then what would have taken 8 to 10 minutes of your time is now being reduced to about 30 seconds or a minute, right? And that's basically taking away all of the excuses you possibly have to not send the email, right? Because if you only have to spend 30 seconds to a minute to doing that, you have an order of magnitude efficiency improvement, and that is exceptionally powerful. Now, many of you guys are probably sitting here and scratching your head and saying, Patrick, that sounds better, that sounds amazing, but I don't think that's possible. All I could tell you is it is possible, because I've done it so many times. It works, and I've seen clients save over 10 hours a week, right? It's possible. And this is real data. This is not just some, Tony Robbins type of promise. It really works, right? And and obviously the example I gave was a simple one, just to show the power of leverage. We have other programs that free up even more time. One concept is called inbox shadowing. It's where the EM reviews your inbox as if he or she is you, and makes decisions and answering emails and labeling emails for you that need your decisions, and so on and so forth. But basically, ultimately freeing you up from being enslaved to your inbox. And therefore allowing your mind to do a lot more creative things that actually move the needle forward. So very powerful. It can save about 40% of your time that you spend in email. So if you're spending 3 hours every day in email, that could go down to about an hour and a half. And that's an hour and a half every day that you save. And that's basically how how we get close to those 10 hours. So there's a lot there. Obviously, I don't have time to get more into details. Again, we'll have a link to a blog post that I've written about inbox shadowing, if you think that's interesting. The only thing I could say is this works, and it's very powerful, right? But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do with this time? And the answer is very clear and easy. Please use it for proactive work. And some part of that time budget should go out to reaching out to people to stay top of mind, because that's how we get breakthrough opportunities, right? And so let's say you find the time to do it. The next question that will hit you is clearly going to be like, well, what do you say? Right. And this, a big part of our coaching is focused around teaching people to deliver meaningful, relevant, and valuable experiences to everybody they stage an interaction with. And that is something I can't cover in an hour, but what I can give you is what I call my 5 freebies. And the reason I call them freebies is because these are things you can always fire off to people you have a decent relationship with, without having to have any kind of background of knowing what the professional challenges are, or, or other things. And so I wanted to offer this up real quick to the audience today here. There are 5 of them. It's been a ping while. There's saying thank you, asking for help, I want to apologize, and saying something positive like paying a compliment. These things are so easy to do. You can do them. I could tell you, Cody, I could ask you right now to come up with a name of anybody that you care about in your network that you haven't touched in 6 months, and you would be able to come up with one of these 5 ways to basically reach out to this person. You would feel good about it. But why don't we spend a little bit more time on 2 of them? One is the thank you one, right? The point that I'm having with the thank you one is that we don't even do it nearly enough. The only thing we do is we do say thank you when it's expected. Cody, I said thank you for inviting all of your users to come to this, and I did that right after you said yes, right? Of course, that's when people expect you to do it, and it's normal. You don't get a lot from it. You maybe can only lose if you don't do it when it's expected, right? But for example, saying thank you in 6 months after somebody did something from you, and saying, hey, I was just thinking about how you had helped me with XYZ 6 months ago, and you say thank you, that hits in like a nuclear bomb, because it all of a sudden shows how much you care, and we don't nearly do that enough, right? And again, the bet that I have is pick any random name. I can guarantee you can say, we can come together up with something, you can say thank you. So no excuse to not basically reach out to these people and come up with something you're thankful or grateful for, right? There's always something there. The next freebie that I wanted to get a little bit more into detail is probably my favorite one, and that is ask for help, right? asking for help is something we do not do enough because we have so much fear about what that means to our perception that these people have from us. But look, this is old knowledge. This is old. Even Benjamin Franklin said, if you want to make a friend, ask a favor, right? And so my recommendation for everybody here today is like, look, take your time, take your time and come up with a project or a theme that you need help with. Be it you want to learn more about, for example, some of my VC clients are really interested in the cryptocurrencies, right? The Bitcoins and so on and so forth, but they don't know anything about it. I say, look, make that your research project and start asking people for help on it. That allows you to reach out. Them getting it from you is something they find relevant, meaningful, and valuable because you think that they are wise or knowledgeable in something, and that just feels good. This is counterintuitiveness about asking for help. When you ask for help, the real person who's getting value is the person being asked for help, not the one who's receiving the help, right? And so, if you're interested in learning about the other freebies, there's a blog post and again another free book that we've written around how to do that. Again, it'll be included in the link on the follow-up email we're sending to you guys. So, Cody, one thing that I think we should offer up to our client, to everybody here is in the right-hand corner, there's a chat area. And and if you have questions, feel free to enter them there. We'll have some time at the end to go through a few questions. And in fact, the way I get rewarded for my work here today is by getting questions. It's really funny, but if I don't get any questions whatsoever, I feel like I failed or my content didn't, wasn't valuable to the people here. So if you have questions, please fire them off. We'll have time to get through it, and so on and so forth. But before we get to the questions, I want to get to the last promise that I had, and that is that I wanted to talk to you guys about what we in the Silicon Valley here call the operator, right? And the operator is a very coveted title, even though you might think it's not very sexy to be called an operator. For many people, for many very powerful CEO entrepreneurs, they actually are, craving that title, want to be called that title. And it is the biggest compliment that one could give somebody who is a startup CEO and runs it. When a VC talks to another VC and says, hey, you got to meet this guy, he's a true operator, that's about as good as it gets, right? And so I want to talk to you guys about what I think an operator does, what are his top 10 traits, and then basically also give you some tips and advice of what you need to do to basically become one. All right. And so bear with me. I'm going to go through my top 10 list here in rapid fire. So stay tuned and focus, because there's a lot of dense information coming at you right now. Right. And the first thing they do is they visualize their objectives and have other people hold them accountable. Right. Like, this is classic, but very powerful. We just don't do it enough. They define what I call their North Star objectives, and they write what I call goal tests. Again, if you want to learn more about that, there's a fantastic blog post I've written about how to go about this on our page, or stay tuned for the offer that I'll give at the end of the session. They also set up an accountability system where they have somebody they know and trust hold them accountable to those goals and checks in with them in some way or other, right? Let's move on to point number 2 and that is that they know what is good for them, right? They don't mind saying no to something that doesn't help them be successful or makes them happy, right? For example, a lot of my clients are absolutely comfortable with having the no asshole rule. They aren't going to work with people that they consider assholes. And a lot of you guys might say, Patrick, that's nice, but in the state that I'm in business, I can't afford it, right? It's a luxury, I can't afford it. My reaction to that is, this is not a luxury, it's a necessity, because every person who's not good for you will slow you down on your path. And I'm sure that many of you guys had those experiences, how much energy these people eat up if they're not a good match for you. And therefore, I would highly recommend know what what is good for you and stick to it. Number 3 is that they also can articulate very clearly who matters most, right? Like that's the big exercise I gave you earlier today in this presentation, and this is a skill that operators have mastered incredibly well. Number 4 is probably one of the most powerful ones that I will list to you guys today, and that is that they are extremely proactive. And I don't even have to say that because the people that that are most successful, if you look at them, they're super proactive. They focus on the things that move the needle most, and they are not being distracted by inbox emails and other things. They just don't deal with that. They deal with what is important, right? But they all have developed some sort of methodology to do that by, for example, embracing daily priorities, white space time, or something we call it maker's time. And through all of that, they basically become very, very proactive. Number 5, let's move on. This is my favorite one. They love being helpful, and they do that at scale. And you might say, hey, Patrick, wait a minute, helping and scale doesn't combine. But yes, it does, right? We have a program that we call value payload management that basically allows you to send items of value to people within 30 seconds that feel, like they matched perfectly well, right? And so the real point I'm saying is that they really enjoy doing that. They enjoy helping, and just learn a way to scale the delivery of meaningful, relevant experiences to people they interact with, right? And it's almost become second nature for them. And the neat thing about that is that type of behavior is so self-enforcing, because when you do good deeds to other people, people will want to pay back, and you will get reciprocal experiences that make you feel at least happier, but most likely it'll also make you more successful, right? Number 6, they maximize the time they spent with people and the investment they get out of that time in terms of building relationships, right? They learn how to deliver killer experiences in meetings, from being truly present to listening very actively, and to always learning what their professional challenges and personal interests are, because those things allow us to touch them more often, to maintain a quasi ongoing conversation that is offline via email, rather than having to meet more and more. Let's move on to the second last page. And that is that they, excuse me, guys, I got to drink some water, but they can train the network when to think of them. And what I mean with that is, yes, top of mind is the most important factor in getting referrals, but what also helps is letting these people know when they should think of you. What triggers are the right ones that whenever that happens to you, think of Patrick, right? For example, a trigger for me is if anybody ever complains to you about not having enough time in the day, think of me, right? That's as simple as it is. And that conversation happens probably quite frequently for a lot of people in my network. So think about that in your own world. What are the triggers that people voice to other people that actually are indicative of a need that they have that you will help fulfill or serve, right? And doing that really well, and then training people around that, especially those people you list in the exercise I gave you earlier, is going to basically reap very powerful benefits. Let's move on to 8. 8, they know also their network. They've trained the network how to tell a story of them that's very visual. What I mean with that is, we don't want them to say, hey, he is a amazing tax attorney. You want them to tell a story that basically is fun and easy to say. He's the tax attorney who has helped Elon Musk, get through some of those vows. That's a very powerful story, right? Of course, not everybody can claim that story, but all of you guys have one of those stories somewhere that makes it easy for people to share that story, or even fun, because if there's one thing that is transcendental across all cultures, all human cultures, is storytelling. We enjoy doing it. It's just something. So enable people to tell your story, and they will reward you for it by doing it more often. And operators are absolutely brilliant at that. All right, we're getting to our second to last one, and that is that they absolutely understand how powerful velocity is, and that they get themselves to be a lot more productive through this concept of leverage. They fully embrace this concept of an EM, and they push the envelope further than you could ever ever imagine. They do things that you just don't, wouldn't think of or wouldn't think possible, or initially would think it would not be, right. But but they do it, and they do it in a very genuine way. And through that, they free up time. And I think most importantly, they end up doing a very good job at increasing the velocity. If you are the leader of a group or a company, the velocity of your company is always determined by your own velocity. And that velocity is how fast you respond to requests and decisions, and on and on and on. And you can increase that dramatically, and make it independent from you by working with such an EM. And operators are good at that. And the last thing that operator does, and this is number 10, and probably the most important one, is that they all get there by working with somebody that helps them get there, a mentor or a coach, right? If you look at people that are top performers in, let's say, high performance sports, all of those have one coach, if not more coaches, and these people have helped them get there. They would have not been able to get there on their own. So invest into learning this stuff rather than just trying to do it with trial and error, because that typically has two big risks for you. Number one, it takes too long, and number two, you make mistakes that will draw you to a conclusion that is wrong, such as this can't work, right? And so those are the top 10 things that an operator does. And I hope that that was somewhat inspirational with you, because we're getting to a point where, I want to just sum up what I try to promise you and what I hope I actually got across to you, right? There are a few things. Number one is I promised you how you can leverage your network in such a way that you can get breakthrough opportunities. I talked to you about how you can overcome the issue of urgence versus importance. And I hope I showed you why you want to become an operator.